It's no secret that I'm a degenerate, but you clicked on the thumbnail, so take a seat and get comfortable because this safari runs express to Base Town. Why am I doing this? Boobs, that's why. But if you need something more elaborate, then fine. Time is the most important currency in any person's life. Time is money and money is time, and it's even more true in the sense of gacha games that have no cost to entry. They want your time so they can get your money, and I am sensitive to feeling like I am having my time wasted. Feeling being the operative word, since all gacha games will have an end of service eventually, so how it feels is really the only thing that matters. To me, the worst offenders are the most popular ones, and this is where I'm going to separate myself from popular opinion, but I'm pretty sure I'm not alone. Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Tower Fantasy, Wuthering Waves, basically all the big ones that use Zelda Breath of the Wild as their base formula, and then iterate on that are side games that want to take the slot of a main game. But my brother in Christ, games like Elden Ring exist. I don't have 15 minutes to listen to poems written for Nigerian prince scams over morning tea before dailies and the next event. So what we're after here are gacha games that are fun, low maintenance, inexpensive, and they know that they're a side piece, just like your mom. Disclaimer, these are not reviews. I have not played these games long enough to know why their communities hate Tectone or whatever dumb controversy lies beneath. All I care about is the game fun? Do I understand enough of the systems to see where they are going? Is the story interesting? And does it feel like a waste of time? I just want to be clear here that gacha games are often quite simple in gameplay terms, but very complicated in terms of systems. So we're looking at the highs and lows, and if there's a mechanic that I gloss over or don't talk about, it's not because I missed it or forgot. It's just not really that important for explaining the game to a new person. Some things are worth discovering on your own. Also, we're not talking about PvP. Just uninstall that mindset straight up. So let's get familiar with these dollar hoovers, and first off, I think we'll start off with Nikke Goddess of Victory. This game has been my guilty pleasure for quite some time. Nikke is a static squad-based shooter, think Time Crisis meets Duck Hunt, and then mix in team building and ability rotations. But before we get too deep, we need to talk plot, and we're going to have a recurring theme here. You are a commander with amnesia. You are saved by a lovely lady named Marion. Marion is a Nikke. Nikke are essentially a human consciousness that has been ported to a robot body built for war against the Raptors. The Raptors being the main villain in the game, think robotic Zerg horde. So anyways, after your rescue, you meet up with two wayward Nikke named Rappy and Anus, and you take command of the squad. Unfortunately, Raptors can corrupt Nikkes after prolonged contact, and Marion starts showing signs of corruption. This puts you as the commander in a terrible situation, as it is a commander's duty to purge corrupt Nikke, and this so happens to be the one that just saved your life. So yeah man, Nikke doesn't waste its time getting to the point, and it doesn't pull its punches. The state of the world in Nikke is pretty dire. Essentially, humanity lost to the Raptors, and everyone is living in an underground city known as the Ark, as they try to find a way to claw their way back from near extinction. Throughout the story, you're going to find many twists and turns, and there's definitely a lot of infighting within the Ark itself. Some view Nikke as tools, some Nikke want independence, some companies want leverage. There's always a controversy, and things aren't quite as they seem on the surface either. That said, the stories can swing wildly between heart-wrenching loss and whimsical, lighthearted moments. The art style is very clean. It's like a candy store with a lot of polish, and the music is top of class. Nikke has the best music with the widest range of any of the gacha games on this list, and it's not even close. I will die on this hill. The point is that if you just switch off your brain and press buttons, it's not going to feel like you're playing anything with depth. And that's Nikke's greatest strength and weakness. No one looking at the game is going to think that there is anything of substance, but peering beyond the veil is highly rewarding and could easily rival most anime out there. I wish there was an anime of Nikke. It reminds me a lot of a sci-fi Claymore crossed with a harem. Most of the story is presented with the characters standing around talking with the occasional anime cinematic. The voice acting is outstanding and present in the main story and all event stories. Anyways, let's get to what really matters. We got thick Nikke, we got thin Nikke, we got check your hard drive Nikke, we've got goth girl Nikke, we got gamer girl Nikke. Nikke has great character art and variation, which is just as well because you spend a lot of time commanding from the rear. I will say that in comparison to other games on this list, Nikke sports the largest diversity of body types, but it's the good kind of diversity, and it's not just in looks. Viper is a sweet talker that that will sell your kidneys. Rappy is all business with something bottled deep down. Neon is a spy because she literally tells you that she is a spy. She also can't dress properly. Drake is a maniacal villain that gets a kick out of things like wasting water and rent-controlled apartments, just to give you an idea. And what I like best is that you don't have to wait for a friggin' event to find this out. The characters are immediately readable and interesting, and when they have an event, they show even more depth. This game also has some really cool crossover characters, and I'ma say it how it is. They tend to add a bit of thickness to the classics if that's what you're into. Let's touch on lewdness. What you see is what you get. There's no secrets or anything. Sure, each Nikke has a story, and at the end they might give you a kiss or hold your hand. Occasionally there's some innuendo. Actually, Rapunzel gets all hot and bothered around any male because she's a nun that secretly reads erotica, but yeah. If you've seen the skill cutscenes, that's it. Depending on your basement level, this will be a pro or a con, but the short is that Nikke fan service doesn't go that far beyond the immediate visuals. There is no stamina system for the story. There are daily limits on events and repeatable content like tribe towers, but you can just play the story as far as your power level and skill will take you. If you get a new character, you don't have to level them because you can put them in the synchro device and that instantly places them at the lowest of your 5 highest characters. Shift Up throws free pulls at you at every anniversary event. Kilo was a free SSR character that they just gave away all the way up to 3 stars. Each time you pull, you get currency for either the limited or permanent banner, and that currency is consistent. This means that you can just bank your currency and straight up buy a limited character the instant it arrives instead of grinding up to 80 pulls for a 50-50 or whatever. Dailies tend to be around 25 minutes and you can power through events quite quickly. The mini games tend to be a cut above the rest as well, especially the Vampire Survivors clone, which could honestly just be its own game. Nikke, while it is still a gacha game and therefore there are multiple resources and items that don't really need to be there, there aren't that many. Gems for pulls and everything else is for upgrades. There's no cards, no cones, you just level up your Nikke. Limit break them with copies, put equipment on them, equipment can be leveled up 5 times, and you have 2 passives and an ultimate ability to level up as well. So yeah, all of the gacha is for the characters, which is great to me because I think pulling for weapons in any game is dumb. Also, there's a PC client so you don't have to run BlueStacks. Gameplay is pretty simple. You have 5 in a squad. Nikke have an element, a weapon type, and they are either a level 1, 2, or 3 super. Element only matters for the higher difficulty content, but you need a mix of weapons to cover different ranges. And then you need at least 1 of each level of supers so you can then reach level 3 supers. From there, you just shoot things and occasionally take cover. There are a few shoot the weak spot and don't shoot boss mechanics. I look at these bosses. They're awesome. You also have Lost Sector, which is more of a maze puzzle mode. Put the box on the button kind of stuff. This is actually really surprisingly well done, and if you've played Stellar Blade, you're going to see a lot of crossover between Lost Sector and Stellar Blade. The roguelite mode mostly gives you resources for your skills, and generally it's the weakest game mode here. I don't like playing it. Now, here's the rub. $20 skins. Personally, I don't mind because the default skins are so good that they are basically paid skins in most of its competitors. I really feel like skins can't just be a different look for that much money. The cash shop is so egregious, and I highly recommend staying away from it altogether. While you can bank for any limited character, there is no 50-50. You either get lucky or you do 200 pulls, now or later. And in that sense, if you aren't paying money, it would be quite the feat to get every Nikke that comes out, never mind 3 stars. But also, if you are spending money in any other game that has a lower threshold, you're probably getting more value. There's also what is called the level 160 hump. As I said before, you need at least 5 characters at a high level to get the rest up there, and that means that you need 5 3-star SSRs, because SSRs are the only characters that can break 160. This will take some time, and I think as a general rule, for most gacha games, it tends to be better to hoard your resources until you really can't proceed. I personally never hit this hump because I take the game very slow, but it is something to be aware of. Our next gacha game likes things wet, and that's Azur Lane. Azur Lane is a little difficult to explain, so I'll tell you a little of my experience. I was out with a friend and they said, "Hey Liv, look at my phone." And it was an L2D skin of Unzen, and I thought to myself, this is a real situation. I need to check this out to make sure that no one gets hurt. So anyways, when you start playing, it's nothing but little schoolgirls and lifeless JPEGs. And it gets worse or better depending on how you look at things. But Azur Lane at the start is a totally different game after a couple weeks or a month depending on your pacing. You think that this is a chibi bullet hell game with anime schoolgirls skidding across the Pacific, but you're wrong. This is a passive resource management game that runs on your second monitor with auto, where you occasionally actually engage manual mode, and let's be real, you probably spend a lot of time just touching things. They aren't people, so it's not wrong, okay? So look, they give you a ton of resources, so you hardly think about the fact that you are using oil every time that you send your fleet into battle. And you start with a ton of gold, so you don't really feel these gallon guzzlers until you're a fair way in. So what's it about? Well, the short is that the world was invaded by seafaring aliens called sirens, and mankind found a way to turn World War I and II ships into anime girls called ship girls. This embodies all of their experiences, strengths, and weaknesses. The plot starts off with a parallel to Pearl Harbor, and from there I kind of lost interest and I only have a general sense of what's going on. I'm going to keep it $1.50. Azur Lane has amazing lore, but that's because the ship girls reference the actual history of the ships by representing them in both body and mind. So Azur Lane has this really interesting pipeline where most people get hooked by the ship girls. The desire to learn more intensifies, and before you know it, you are on Drakennefel's YouTube channel learning about Mark 14 torpedoes, and it's 2 AM. Here's an example. If you have watched my videos, you know that HMS Formidable is actually the best girl. If you listen to her dialogue, she talks a lot about eating and trying to watch her weight, and she's also kind of well endowed. So then you will go to YouTube and watch Drakennefel's video, because that will be one of the top videos, and you'll learn that HMS Formidable broke her restraints and self-launched at the beginning of her service, killing several people. That's where the gimmick of being chunky comes from. Also, British carriers had armored runways. There are actually accounts of Japanese kamikaze pilots and bombs simply bouncing off of Formidable, and that's why she is well endowed. And that's some quote-unquote visual storytelling. So yeah, man, there's this huge history retelling system between Azur Lane, World of Warships, and YouTube, and it's just really engaging. So when people say that Azur Lane has a lot of depth, it really does, but it's this external ecosystem that they are talking about. Boobs are just the gateway to understanding and knowledge. So let's get down to business. Azur Lane ship girls range from this could be something that Eren Yeager fights in season 1 of Attack on Titan, all the way to shut up and take my money. 99% of the time you are getting a still JPEG, and you are going to be spending money if you want the good L2D skins, because getting free gems is pretty rare. But in defense of my irresponsible spending habits, you can touch these ship girls, and there's an entire meta based on figuring out the interactions with the skins, so technically this is a gameplay mechanic. Yeah, okay, I'm a fiend. Don't look at me. Which then brings us to lewdness. Yeah, Azur Lane is a step up in comparison to Nikke. If you are a heterosexual male and you have a preference, Azur Lane is not afraid to go there. Like, I have a friend that swears by unicorn and says that her healing is amazing and she's irreplaceable. Sure. I'm sure that's it, bro. Like, we're having a night with the boys doing some Azur Lane pulls, and he's like, yeah, so I randomly got this unicorn skin by accident. All I'm saying is you can't trust unicorn names. Also feet. Also, do not let this CEO lady fool you. Behind the innocent facade lurks a special kind of evil, and we are all very grateful. So yeah, if fan service is your thing, then Azur Lane has you covered, and the good news is that while the good skins are going to cost you, the good ships don't. For starters, ship girls are relevant within the top 3 rarities. Some will argue there's a use for even the most base level ship girls like Ranger, but UR, SSR, and elite ships all have a place. Some elite ships upgrade into SSR, some SSR upgrade into UR. Azur Lane has a very high pity, as in you have to pull a lot to get there, but it's only for UR ships, and the drop rate for SSR ships is 7%. That means you have pretty good odds of getting something good on every 10 pull. But believe me, random is random, and you will serve your time in gacha hell. It doesn't stop there. You don't have to get multiple copies to limit break, so it might take some time, but you are never gated from maxing out a ship girl that you only got once. Pulling in Azur Lane is a little different in how it works. Basically, in any fleet, you have a backline and a frontline. Frontline ships cost 1 wisdom cube, and backline ships cost 2. Frontline girls are the ones that you control, while your backline are the majority of your big damage, though these roles can sometimes be flipped depending on what you're doing. Anyways, that's the gist, but it also costs gold. And then there's a build timer that you can use another item to instantly complete the build. So yeah, 3 resources for a pull. Did I mention that this is a resource management game? Here's the part you don't think about. You're going to have so many ship girls, you will run out of space. So you need to think about managing your inventory. You need to think about oil, because the higher rarity ships consume more oil. You need to farm levels for the chance to get blueprints to then craft the weapons for your ship girls. So So yeah, Azur Lane is a long haul kind of game. But Liv, I thought that you said that these were games that don't waste your time. Well yeah, because really you interact with the game for a minute or two and then you just leave it for later. Oil and gold is a passive and active income, so you aren't really punished for taking breaks. I mean, you'll miss out on the most limited ship girls, but my brother in Christ, I promise you that there is a better one just around the corner. I'll just quickly caveat here that some of the strongest ship girls in the game are only available through the research system. The only requirement being that you have collected enough ships of that faction to start the research process, and then it's just a grind of the requirements. Heck, some of the SR ship girls are random level drops. It's just impossible to feel screwed over by the gacha when there are so many avenues for growth. Azur Lane, like Nikke, is easy to fit into your daily life, but also it's a better phone game than Nikke because you are really just hitting some menu buttons, let the level farm itself, and then you come back later, which sounds like there is no skill expression, but if you really want to dive into it, there is the harder content that requires you to think about your fleet composition and take control of your fleet's front line to minimize the damage you take and make sure that your torpedoes hit. But for me, I just want to build my maid brigade and work on my Iron Blood fleet. So yeah, if you want to dabble with the World War I and II history aspect, if you want to get touchy with fan service, if you like party building and low maintenance, then Azur Lane is for you. The downsides are that the story is kind of How's Your Mother when it's not leaning into the history aspect. If you do run out of oil, you're just stuck for a while, and it's almost certain that this will happen at least once before you sort of learn the weekly cycles and what to prioritize, because the game focuses on teaching you the manual bullet hell gameplay that you aren't going to use instead of the actual game. Also, Azur Lane has the longest weekly maintenance times out of any gacha game I've ever played. This looks like a game that would run in a browser, so I have no idea what they're doing, but it cannot be efficient. The last one is a pro and a con. The mini games are a bit hit or miss. Sometimes they're great, sometimes they're a chore, but the good news is that you can fail every single one of them within a couple of seconds and you still get the reward. Places to be, ship girls to touch and whatnot. Next is Punishing Grey Raven. This is the gacha game that Kuro Games made before Wuthering Waves. If you saw my video on Wuthering Waves, you're going to know why I prefer this one. So what's going on? Who knows? There's a virus called the Punishing Virus. Humans are living in outer space and they're creating constructs which are basically, well, a human consciousness downloaded into a construct resembling a human. If this seems familiar, well yeah, we've heard this one before. That's not to say that Punishing Grey Raven is a bad story or anything, it's just that there isn't any voiceover for the main story, so I'm reading with still images and silence in it, and it just feels like it would be a cool manga or something, but I'm here to press buttons. So anyways, if you're familiar with something like Honkai Impact 3rd, then you know what this is. Arenas with bad guys, and you have 3 characters in your squad that you can swap to, and you hit the bad guys until they're dead. I said it once, I'll say it again, the ping system is the best action combat system in any gacha game, and I would go as far to say that it's pretty good as far as action games go in general. So like most of these games, you have one attack button and a dodge that slows down time for enemies if you hit a perfect dodge. Standard stuff, as you attack enemies, you'll see different icons called pings at the bottom of the screen, red, blue, and yellow. Basically, while you are attacking, you are also playing Connect 3, and burning a row of matching pings does a corresponding special move. These pings also correlate with your allies, usually in blue, red, and yellow positions, so that they can kind of jump in for an attack. So say you're playing a red character, if you link 3 yellow pings and then burn them, you can have your yellow character tag in for an attack. You also get supers, and there's a ton of depth in this system. I mean, just considering changing to certain characters automatically generates a 3 ping of a certain kind, in some cases, is a thing on its own, but a lot of special characters also break the rules, so it's just very cool. I love the system, and I'm kind of disappointed that it's not in Wuthering Waves, but that's fine. Also, I say that I enjoy it, but I am very much a scrub, so it's not like I actually capitalize on these synergies. I just level the ones that look cool, and if I get stuck, I'll look for some guidance online. So it's got a lot of depth for those that want it, but it's also quite easy to just pick up and enjoy. So let's get down to business. Kuro Games like subtle color palettes. There's a lot of gray and black uniforms with white hair, and then maybe a little color to punch up the designs. These characters are not made to be sexy per se, and they can look a bit samey at a glance. I personally like the subtle color scheme, but I wish that they went a little more sci-fi with the designs. Like, I love Rosetta and Luna because they push that envelope a little, and I feel like Lucia Crimson Abyss is really iconic. But yeah, it doesn't help that a lot of these characters characters are variations of the same 4 characters or so it does get really samey when it comes to looks. You're going to have to fork out some money if you want to change that, and here's where we start running into some problems. While Punishing Grey Raven is more generous than Genshin, the Honkais, and the Wuthering Waves, in terms of pity, there are several annoying factors here that are red flags for me. Stamina is strike 1. Like, at least in Azur Lane, there's a passive income, and yes, someone's going to say that it's not a problem, well then fine, take it out of the game then. Like, if it's not a problem, just remove it. Whatever excuse you're going to make doesn't really hold up to the common sense that it doesn't add anything of value to the person playing the game. Now, strike 2 is weapon banners. No one gets an S-rank character and thinks, yay, I can't wait to start working on getting the weapon. Strike 3, memories. Partly because I simply prefer more diegetic looking upgrade systems, but it also means that this is another thing that you have to level up in Limit Break because that's how it is in Hoyoverse games. My issue with this is not only the time that you have to invest overall, but also just look at it. Who wouldn't feel overwhelmed by all the intersecting systems and resources mixed with the seeming mountain of grind before you? And I say seeming because once you get into the swing of things, it's probably not so bad. I can hear you typing it right at this moment, but that's not what people feel when they first see this mess. I'll also caveat here that Punishing Grey Raven's item icons are terrible for knowing what you're getting at a glance. Everything looks like my sister's postage stamp collection, and it really adds to the barrier of entry. You'll likely want to turn to a guide to figure all of this stuff out, and that is usually an indicator that it is not working as intended. I have to say that I find the arbitrary layered leveling systems to be a big problem for new players, and this aspect is worse in games that use Hoyoverse games as their template. I feel like these developers don't really ask themselves if there's a better way. Anyways, not a popular take, but I'm willing to bet that there are a number of gamers that think that Punishing Grey Raven isn't popular because the combat is not accessible. But what I think is the real issue is that it shares similar bloat to a Hoyoverse game, but it lacks the production value and legacy to back it up. In short, I think if it focused more on keeping people engaged with the excellent gameplay and less time in the menus, it would be much more inviting and more people would be able to play it alongside some of the bigger gachas that it tries to rub up against. But look, play it for the combat. I find that to be more rewarding for the time spent than Wuthering Waves. Also, while I said that Nikke has the best music, the song Above the Summer is so good that sometimes I just opening Punishing Grey Raven to listen to it in the menu while I'm doing things around the house. From here, we may as well talk about SnowBreak Containment Zone, and the reason why is because the systems are practically identical and so they have similar strengths and weaknesses. SnowBreak Containment Zone is, well, there's snow and it's a virus, and there's containment zones that contain it. And in those zones, there are titans. Essentially, you wake up in a space station, you put on a goofy suit, and then you take an escape pod to Earth, where you then take command of a superhuman squad called Heimdall. Well, it is the classic plot of, hi, I'm from space with amnesia, and now I command girls. Your character comes across as pretty intelligent. It's a very similar feel to Arknights if you've played that. Basically, you are a tactical genius. The story is quite good, but again, none of this is voice acted, and over time, it's just going to wear you down into skip mode. I always hope that these games will one day come back and just add voices to their stories, because it's a really big deal for getting people on board and invested, but I doubt it will ever happen. Now, where SnowBreak is different is that while it is still a squad of 3 that you swap between, this one is a third-person shooter with abilities. It's nothing complicated, but it is fun and competent. I've played worse full-price shooters, that's for sure. I would say that while the character models for the girls are great, everything else is quite minimalistic. In fact, the whole game is minimalistic and a bit dinky. This will definitely put some people off, but ironically, if you compare it to Punishing Grey Raven, which has basically the same systems and a higher quality of presentation, SnowBreak is far easier to read and figure out. So it's a dinky looking game, but it is well laid out. Another pro is that this one has the quickest dailies out of all of them. It's 5 minutes and then you're done, which is really nice because it means it's very easy to bank up and then just hop on when there's a character that you want to get. So let's get down to business. SnowBreak was on the verge of shutting down when they had the genius idea of boobs, and this has brought a resurgence of players coming back into the game. Some old fans are upset because some of the story has been retconned to avoid a Mr. Raymond incident. Oh geez. Okay, context. Another Chinese gacha game called Girls Frontline released a sequel where the waifu they married in the previous game won't shut up about an NPC called Mr. Raymond. It made many Chinese players very upset to the point where they review bombed every game that developer ever made. So naturally, now I think a lot of Chinese devs are a little scared of having characters that have relationships that can trigger a second Mr. Raymond calamity. Anyways, it's a tough one because old fans lose out and they feel it's weird that old characters that were little girls are getting re-released with massive upgrades. But at the same time, it's kind of also true that there wouldn't be a game at all if they didn't do something. I'm torn because this is a facts don't care about your feelings moment, but it also really does suck when it's your thing. I find it hilarious how people talk about games they aren't involved in, and then they just instantly fold into the polar opposite when you critique a game they love. Anyways, these characters are nice, and the newer ones definitely offer fan service, and some of the skins are wild. Are you going to pay real money for these skins? I don't know. Do bears shit in the woods? Where the fan service is a little unique in SnowBreak is that you can walk around as your character in third person and interact with the ladies in their dorms and, you know, work together on the ultimate strategy. Okay, it's not quite that explicit, but humans are creative, and that's why we're great. So where do things go wrong? Well, I mentioned the dinky presentation, but also the systems are very similar to Punishing Grey Raven, so that means we're pulling for weapons again. You have a memory system, though this one is half as many, so that's nice, I guess, and you have stamina again. It is refreshing to play a gacha shooter. I mean, look at this. It's definitely fun, but the gameplay doesn't feel that deep, so I feel the minimalist story presentation hurts it more than other games. There's definitely some high points in the story, like when you have to fight Ymir on the rooftop, but you need the voiceovers and a little more motion to sell it and get people there. That said, SnowBreak easily fits in your back pocket as a 5-minute daily thing that you can sometimes dabble in for longer periods. That's the role it fits, and it does it really well, and that's why it's here. Next up, we have Path to Nowhere, and someone's gonna be like, well, what about Arknights? So I'll have to address this first. Arknights was among the games I played in putting this video together, but it failed to make the cut because it frankly has more time wasting both in mechanics and storytelling than any other game here. Not a bad game, especially if you're already a veteran, but it just doesn't fit the criteria. So anyways, in Path to Nowhere, you play as chief of the MBCC in this city. No, that's not slang, that's actually the name of the city. So what is the MBCC, or the Minos Bureau of Crisis Control? Well, basically you are the chief of a prison of supervillains. These villains are called sinners. Being a sinner gives you powers, but you can also lose your mind and devolve into monsters called corruptors, or worse, you can kind of blow up and create this black ring which makes that area uninhabitable and just a place full of corruptors. So first neat thing about Path to Nowhere is that you can choose between being a male or female chief. So anyways, what makes you the female chief is that you have the ability to control sinners with an ability called the Shackles. Basically, any sinner you touch is compelled to obey your commands, but it also tends to nullify corruption as well. Our story starts when your consciousness repair program is interrupted by a powerful sinner that takes you out of the program, essentially wiping your memory. Surprise, surprise. But the twist is that this sinner then copies your face and uses it to unlock all the doors, starting a prison riot. In the commotion, you meet your first sinner who tries to kill you. This sinner's name is Hella, and she is the same English voice actor as Paimon.
Please let me out. I begged you so many times. Are you gonna let me out or not? There's only a dumpster here.
So your goal is to basically round up the sinners and restore order, but this city has other plans for you, and you constantly find yourself in a world of lies, double agents, double crossing, ambushes, and unlikely allies. This story had me hooked 5 minutes in, and hours later, I'm not skipping. I think it really helps that the story doesn't have you seeking romantic relationships with sinners. I mean, you are trying to fix them and resolve their issues, but sometimes you're just trying to survive. Like 99 purposely gets caught so she can have the chance to kill you in an interrogation room, and you barely survive. It works well because it allows your gacha characters to be a friend or a foe in spite of the fact that you are using them, and that's a refreshing level of tension because it makes winning a sinner over to your side a more fulfilling experience. Like having sinner interrogations as a way of earning their respect and learning more about them is such a refreshing spin on the relationship features that these games tend to come with. And I really look forward to peeling back the layers and finding out who these characters are, but also fundamentally the storytelling doesn't stuff around and getting to the point, and a lot of the story happens instead of being talked about. The downside is that there is a bit of lag with the world building. Things happen quickly and you need to be okay with not completely understanding what's going on in the moment, especially when it starts getting into the more supernatural elements and traversing other characters' minds. But yeah, some people are fine with this, some people are not. Gameplay wise, we're talking tower defense, except there are some nuances that make this one a little different. In Path to Nowhere, you just plonk 6 sinners on the map before the level starts, but there's no build up or building costs or deployment costs. Where it's different is that you can use the shackles to move your sinners around, and you have a limited number of moves. This allows you to do things like rotate tanks. I'd also say that with the lower count, Path to Nowhere has you interacting with your sinners a lot. For example, Iron's special move is a placed AoE that also changes her location. Uni is a tank whose ability places a shield on another selected sinner. So this game moves a little away from the feeling of a grand strategy and more so a practice of adjusting your plan on the fly. It's also worth mentioning that in most levels there is only one point to defend, and that is you, the chief. That does make things simpler, but remember that you only have 6 sinners, and if you are out in the open, you can't just use 4 tanks, so yeah, figure it out. So as far as tower defense games go, Path to Nowhere feels quite active, with more of an ability to counterplay what the level throws at you. Also, you as the chief have access to powers called Potestis. You can choose one before the level, and these range from abilities that set off traps to shielding your sinners. Moving on, one aspect that is so underrated in this game is that the UI is the smartest UI in all of Gacha. For example, if I need a resource to level a character and I choose to farm a level to get those resources, it will automatically calculate how many times the level needs to be run, and it just produces the results, sweeping the level and consuming stamina. And once I have the resources, it will take me straight back to the upgrade screen to level up my character. And look, if you want, you can just take the whole menu away and have the assist feature just give you a checklist of activities that you can run through. Every Gacha game should have this instead of that stupid character that pops up randomly and forces you to go into a certain menu to say, hey, look, here's another thing. It does this thing that you don't know anything about. I'm not going to let you leave until you finish this activity once. Another good thing is that Path to Nowhere doesn't have much in terms of resource bloat. You do have these memory upgrades called crime brands, but there's only 3 of them, so I'm only half disappointed. They're also not really that essential as far as the gameplay took me. So let's get down to business. Are there waifus? It depends. This game is not really in the business of fan service in the same way that Azur Lane or Nikke are. In fact, Path to Nowhere veers more towards realistic proportions with a bend towards sleek and graceful designs, while still giving off a kind of Sin City aesthetic. Also, L2D skins. You get good L2D skins for maxing out a character, and that is special. Most gachas do not do that. Now, I'm really glad that they used this art style. I like variety, but it is also true that the meta anime look is just the meta for these kinds of games, and some people are going to be turned off, but I'm personally grateful, and I think that they did a great job. I think this art style is highly underrated. Unfortunately, I can't quite say the same thing for the 3D models in the game. They're not terrible, but anyone is going to glance at this and see this cheap game from 2015 that you see in your YouTube pre-roll. I kind of wish that they went with 2D sprites because in my opinion, 3D just ages faster, so you need to go hard or go home. So let's talk about problems. Stamina systems. I know I say it a lot, but it's not a prerequisite for a gacha game, and I will point it out every single damn time. It's just plainly an anti-customer mechanic. The other thing that I don't enjoy is that it reminds me of how Hoyoverse games ferret away your gacha resources in tiny amounts throughout the menus. 30 hypercubes here, 50 here, 35 here. It's annoying. Don't talk to me unless you have 100 and put them in one place. I mean, I need 1,800 of these things. What does 35 or 10 do? So yeah, if you like the aesthetic, there isn't really another game like it. It's that and the story that are going to be the main draws here. Let's not beat around the bush. Tower defense games are somewhat niche and they're really boring to watch. So when Path to Nowhere has an event, they add completely new mechanics to the gameplay, or they just make an entirely different game. I saw this paint by numbers thing and I didn't really think I'd be into it, but I ended up spending way longer than I normally would on it because it was just so well thought out. What I'm getting at here is that events often offer completely different games from the base game, and in that way it's a really nice buffet. But also it's on the list, and that means that the dailies don't take long at all, and you do earn passive income from your prison, which is similar to the base and Archites. So it ends up being quite easy on time. Okay, no more tower defense. Path to Nowhere had minimal fan service, but we're about to go straight down to the basement, and you wouldn't even know it at first glance. But Browndust 2. This game is wild. Like, I thought nothing was as lewd as Azur Lane, but oh boy. I mean, look at this. This looks like a Nintendo exclusive where reviewers circle jerk over the art style, exclaiming the beauty and the retro aesthetic. You know, the innocence and wonder of a fonder and simpler time. So anyways, you start the game as Lethal, the village herbalist, out in the forest, and you are attacked by an evil warlock. At the last moment, a strange girl with a hood jumps out and saves you, but the evil warlock escapes. You pass out and wake up in your bed. You reason that it was a bad dream and your friends don't believe you anyways, so they go out into the forest to do their daily routine. Wandering around the village, you run into the girl again and realize it was all true. The girl's name is Justina and she wants to kill the warlock, and you want to save your friends, and so an uneasy alliance is formed. And yeah man, the game doesn't even open to a menu at the start. It goes straight into the story, and if you don't press the menu button, button, you wouldn't even know you were playing a gacha game. Beautiful graphics, great sprites, fully voice acted, and no nonsense autoplay for dialogue that doesn't stop so you can pretend that you're making a choice that literally does nothing. The main story, as far as I've played it, is a familiar story, but it is a good story, and it doesn't waste time in setting up the initial hook. Gameplay wise, you mostly click on the main story quest, autopathing will take over while walking around the world until the story throws you into an encounter or a dialogue. You are rewarding for watching what's going on here because there are traps, items to pick up, and you will miss these if you just leave it on autoplay. Also, you get healing by dashing through jars. Battles are turn-based, you plan your party's attacks, abilities, order, and position, and then you watch your plan in action. If anyone is still alive on the other end, they'll try to do the same back to you. The aim is to position your characters to minimize damage while manipulating your opponent's positioning to maximize your damage. Each character usually has a basic attack, a knockback or a pull, and a special move. The basic attack and the knockback or pull is locked to the character, but the special move is determined by the costume that the character is wearing. For example, when Justia is wearing her hood, her ability strikes 2 enemies in front, and if it's down, she does a horizontal sweep. So aside from the main characters like Lethal and Justia, characters come and go with the story and you can use them temporarily, but if you get one of their costumes, then that character is permanently available to you. So anyways, Browndust 2 is kind of bipolar because it realizes that it's a gacha game partway through, or whenever you first click on the main menu, and you're just barraged with notifications, battle passes, free draws, everything you can imagine, it's there. I personally prefer this, and I find the separation of the gacha menus and the gameplay to be so refreshing. So let's get down to business. Browndust 2 knows exactly what it is, and it's going to be immediately obvious the first time you draw the president of the manga club holding a body pillow. If that doesn't tip you off, then maybe the nun whipping herself to increase your spell damage might. I can't even show some of these on YouTube, and it's not just a couple of characters. Just speaking on the visuals and the animations, the skill cutscenes are really high quality, and it's a joy in more ways than one to see them play out. But I will mention this, everything in the game has a soft white glow to it that makes the bright colors blend very well, but it also looks a little like you're playing the game in a sauna, which is either hyper meta and intentional for the steamy content, or it's just what it is and you'll either like it or you won't. Like, let me just lay out the plot for the anniversary event. You're playing as a DJ at a pool party, and you and your friend find out that there's a problem where girls are unconscious and covered in an unknown lotion. So you go on to find out that there's this giant octopus that is covering these girls in mucus, and when it does, the girls get really excited and then they lose their energy shortly after. So then the owner of the octopus said that the character named Delvy hugged the octopus and then it grew and got all weird. So you talk to Delvy to find out that she's a 9-tailed fox and she's at the party to steal the essence of confident men, but she kept getting swarmed by weak men. So anyways, she siphoned some of their spirit into a container for later, and the octopus stole that container and is now being powered by the frustrations of unconfident weebs. So you then confront the octopus and your friend decides that the octopus is not a threat and is just frustrated, so she goes to play with it and disappears in its tentacles. The octopus is somehow satisfied that it's finally getting attention and returns to normal. What has this got to do with the main story? Hell if I know, but yeah, Browndust 2 has an audience and they are 2 parts JRPG enjoyer and 1 part degenerate, and that's fine by me. Now the main story itself is quite innocent, and if you turn off the skill animations you won't see anything lewd, but the characters still exist, so you can't really pretend like it's not there. Now none of this means anything if you don't have costumes, so let's talk about the gacha. So Lethal is a 5-star, Justia is a 5-star, and pretty much everyone that joins your party on this quest is going to be a 5-star. Costumes are what you pull for those, so each costume can be limit broken 5 times with duplicates or rare upgrade materials. This will affect the power of the ability that the costume provides, but not your base stats. Your gear and level do that. On top of that, each costume has an upgrade path with gold and crystal resources that you get from playing the game and farming. I have never seen so many free pulls in my life. Like when a Hoyoverse game says free 80 pulls, it's like 80 pulls between level 1 and 40, you'll get them a month later or whatever. But Browndust 2 just straight up gives you a ton of gems and 30 free pulls just straight up for playing the game. On top of all this, almost every banner has a free daily pull. The honeymoon game in this game is so incredibly strong. However, we are pulling for weapons and I will be consistent and not like that. Weapon crafting is actually an out of combat ability that certain characters can perform with the right resources. You can level this ability all the way up to crafting your most powerful UR weapons, so I kind of think I'll just do that instead of using the weapon banners. But yeah, it's definitely the one I will let slide because Browndust 2 is just so generous by comparison to most gacha, even though I fundamentally disagree with it. This Korean level bullshit upgrade system is giving me Lost Ark flashbacks. I hate it, but I can't stop because, well, I'm stupid. Now, there is a catch to be aware of, and that is because the costumes are abilities, there's a general balance that dictates that lower rarity costumes that are limit broken 5 times are generally more powerful than your 5-star costumes that are limit broken to 2+. The breakpoint is around 3+, which means that if you are trying to min-max the game without a pity system, it can be pretty rough. I personally don't care about it. You will eventually get enough items and pulls to get there in time, kind of like Nikke, but you aren't going to get there fast. Speaking of pulling, I like that they made the effort to make it look like you are going to an artisan and that they are revealing the work that you commissioned them for. I love these little details. Like when you change chapters, it's a game cartridge, and when you try to load it in, it doesn't work, and you have to shake it and the gems fall out of the cartridge, and then you can load the level. It just shows a little bit of creativity that's really nice to see. I would love to see this level of care in other games. Don't look into the earnings of this game though, by the way, because it's going to make you a little depressed. For starters, say it out loud. Browndust 2. Second, advertising was horrible. Third, this game launched with terrible Korean levels of grind and hatred for free-to-play players. What the game is now is kind of a redemption arc for that nonsense. Another one is that the gameplay is not what is currently popular at the moment, and I think that this last one is pretty important. It's not a very good phone game. It's a much better experience on PC, and it has a PC client, but the PC client also doesn't let you use the shop. So, you know, just kind of throwing away money there. I recommend using BlueStacks. I will say this, I spent money on this game within the first week of playing it, and that's rare. I didn't do that for any other game on this list. Browndust 2 doesn't feel like a gacha game, and I love that I can just play it and totally ignore the banners and gems and gambling aspects and convoluted menu structures and just enjoy something that is crafted to be good entertainment first and foremost. That said, I'm not up to chapter 7, and apparently that can be a bit of a wall. I'll address this because the game kind of shoots itself in the foot even though this aspect is well intended. The game has a rotating elemental world buff that increases that element's damage by 50%. The last one was wind, this update is light. 50% is monstrous, and there are elemental weaknesses like light beats dark, etc. Unfortunately, there's also combat power. People will look at combat power and think that that is the goal, but the game wants you to rotate your roster with the world buff. Just as an example, look at my rating for this level. In most other games, you would predict a loss, but I won. As a character buffet enjoyer, I really like this approach to balance, but it's going to be miserable if you are someone that chases the meta. But also, if you're a meta chaser, what are you doing in a gacha game? Like, seriously. But out of all of the games so far, if Browndust 2 went to end of service, I would pay to play the main story quests of this game in an offline mode. I don't really feel that way about most gacha games. And this is kind of a clue to the strength of Browndust 2. In a lot of gacha games, it feels like there is some gaping hole, like the presentation, the narrative, the gameplay, the pacing, the menus. It's always something, but here there are so many little things that just fit together just so. So it feels like a quality product, and that's why I like Browndust 2 so much. Anyways, we need to move on to our last game, and this is a game that anytime I mention anything bad about gacha, there will always be that one guy that's like, Limbus Company. You gotta try Limbus Company. Well, I tried it, and I'm so glad I did. What an odd child it is. Limbus Company never got the memo on how a gacha game is supposed to operate. For starters, you can play it through Steam, and that's actually a bigger W than people think for accessibility. It also means that they're not scared of having players review their game right on their store page. SnowBreak is the only other gacha on this list that does that. So similar to Browndust 2, we just drop straight into the story where you, as the main protagonist, are right in the moment of losing your memory. Like, yes, this is old now, but at least we're experiencing it in the moment. You're in the woods and you can't remember why you're there, and you try to make a sound but nothing comes out of your mouth. Turns out your head is a clock, and you did have an idea of what was going on, but now you have no idea. And you don't have time to think about it because there's a group of people trying to kill you. And then, I kid you not, a bus shows up and these badasses come to save you, and then they get killed in seconds. And then an old man with red eyes and a notebook shows up and dismembers one of the people that are trying to kill you, and they run away. You somehow raise the bus people back from the dead because you have made a pact with them. These so-called sinners. Saved, right? Sort of. You see, the guy with red eyes is called Virgilus, and he mentioned something about an aspect which tingles your memory a little and says that he can help you get back to normal. So you accept your position on the bus as the manager, the manager of the motley crew that just got slaughtered minutes ago. So anyways, it turns out that being the manager isn't quite as optional as you thought, and Virgilus doesn't have a problem torturing you if you don't do as he says. It's kind of just as well though, because Virgilus is also the only thing keeping your sinners from killing each other over and over and over. They have no chill. From here we have a story that is kind of like Magic School Bus meets Ocean's 11, except everything is wrong. The bus eats people for fuel, the driver refuses to read maps, and the only reasonable sinner has an insectoid limb, and you're not really a leader. One of the best aspects of the story is seeing how you and your elite immortal sinners will somehow screw things up. But even better is that the writing for the characters of this world is spectacular. You can tell that this is a game world that has been built on in a previous game. You don't need to know anything from those games, but it just really helps that it is there in the background anchoring the madness. So each of the sinners has a story, a reason they are there. The first chapter focuses on Gregor, the guy with the insect arm, so I'm going to keep it $1.50. The art in Limbus Company is kind of the art style that reviewers are obligated to say is authentic and breathtaking, but I'm almost certain that while the art style is technically good, it's probably one of the major reasons a lot of people will never play this game. I was not really interested in these characters at first glance, but at the end of the first canto, which are chapters, the credits will roll, Gregor will sing his song, and you will love Gregor too. The sinners are completely unfettered by the need that other gachas have to be the visual advertising for the game, and instead here you have these amazingly talented people with flaws as deep as the Mariana Trench, and you can't help but think, I want to understand how you got like this. There's also characters that have you wondering why they are sinners at all. They seem fine. They seem fine. And so you want to know more about them. So yeah, the maturity of the character writing in Limbus Company is leagues ahead of anything on this list, and it's not even close. Okay, but I haven't talked about the gameplay yet. So how does Limbus Company play? Well, I still don't know. Okay, I just watched this 20-minute video and then this other 20-minute video, and I think I kind of understand. Unfortunately, there's two things going on here. Limbus Company has a terrible tutorial, but also there are multiple competing and interacting mechanics that are simple on their own, but very complicated when you try to take them all into account. It's also not a standard system. It's technically turn-based combat, but it's more like you lay out your desired actions and the game takes several turns based on those choices, using coin flips mixed with karma, mixed with just watch the video. It also doesn't help that there are two different combat modes. More commonly, you simply chain the abilities and your sinners attack whoever the game decides they are going to attack. And then in boss battles or against abnormalities, there's focus mode, which allows you to target certain parts. That alone doesn't sound like much, but with all these systems underpinning it, it leads to wild differences in how you manipulate those systems. I mean, look at this. It's a mess. But the real question is, can you just ignore it, match the colors, and apply the principle of bigger numbers equals better person? Worked for me. Until I met this asshole. So you are playing on borrowed time. Sooner or later, you'll need to look up how it works and study the numbers. I'll link the combat tutorials in the description. Credit to Escu. Thanks, bro. So let's get down to business. There's no waifus. I mean, maybe? Not really. Like I said, this is a fixed cast of characters. When you pull in Gacha, the bus is pulling the same characters from alternate realities, so same but different. You're also pulling for egos, which are essentially your special moves, though pity is 200. And look, ignore the pity because like Nikke, you can just buy the characters from the shop by saving shards of your duplicate pulls. You'll also have to level up an uptie, which is limit breaking, so you have a resource for that, or you can convert your duplicate shards. So again, there's a shared resource thing there. You have some decisions to make. Pulling for identities and egos is pretty fair, but it's also pretty underwhelming in the sense that, like I said before, you're competing with anime girls. It's just tough out there, you know? While there are some pretty cool identities, it takes a while to figure out what you even want to do with team building, and when you are pulling for characters, you are essentially pulling for their abilities. Is this a good one? I don't know. And by the time you figured out what you were going to do, you probably have just earned enough resource to buy it in the store anyways. Like I said before, Limbus Company Company is an odd child. You have these amazingly well-written chapters, you have this off-the-wall combat system, and these esoteric terms that you've never heard of in other games. And you also have this very simple-looking UI. This one has the fewest resource systems of any of the gacha games mentioned. Thank you. I can't wait to come home after work and see what happens in the next canto. I know that if you give this game a chance, you'll like it too. There is just one problem out of every gacha here. The stamina system. It hurts this game the most. Like, imagine you're watching the Squid Games for the first time and you get to this cliffhanger episode and you go to watch the next episode and Netflix hits you with, sorry, you've run out of stamina. It makes me so mad. At this point, you know why it's bad. I'm not going to repeat myself. So yeah, that's every gacha on the Safari, and while I was making this video, I was playing them all concurrently. That's miserable, by the way, because it means several hours of account management. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, you know? So don't do that. I think for most people, 2 gachas is the drinking limit. What I'm going to do is break these off into categories, and I'll tell you which are the best 2 for those categories. So here we go. Daily routine. SnowBreak Containment Zone and Nikke are the winners. These games took the least amount of time to maintain with daily activities. Most rewarding gacha, Azur Lane and Browndust 2. I mean, in Azur Lane, 7% chance to get something good is hard to beat regardless of pity, and there's no extra nonsense like weapons. Browndust 2 more so because you simply get so many free pulls that you just get a lot of cool stuff. That said, I do think that this is a honeymoon thing, and once you're trying to build something specific, you're going to be sad. You could sub Browndust 2 for Punishing Grey Raven here, since you can guarantee a character within 80 pulls, but it just doesn't feel as fun. Best waifus, Nikke and Azur Lane. I don't need to say anything, you just watch the screen. Best gameplay, Punishing Grey Raven and Limbus Company. I lean more towards Limbus Company because I can't stop thinking about it. Punishing Grey Raven is good when I want to forget about reality by focusing on pressing buttons. Best story, Limbus Company and... I'm gonna have to say Nikke. Limbus Company is immediately obvious, it's just night and day in terms of writing in gacha games. But Nikke, like, I'm not embarrassed to tell people that I play a horny game, but I am embarrassed to admit that I got a little emotional over Red Hood's character arc, or Overzone, or Scarlet and Rose, so yeah. This game hits me in the feels. This is a tough one, and I'm going to cheat a little and just say that after those 2, Path to Nowhere and Browndust 2 also have good narratives and are very well worth playing for those narratives. Best music, Nikke and Path to Nowhere. I already feel like gachas spend half of their budget on music, but these 2 stand out to me. Nikke has the widest range and is excellent in every genre it touches, while Path to Nowhere's soundtrack seems to just really grab the mood of what's going on, and well, yeah, I'm also just a sucker for this guitar lick. Best PvP, don't know, don't care. Best on a phone, Azur Lane and Nikke. I tried, but the others just required too much concentration for me to enjoy while I'm out in public. You just have to kind of keep your phone brightness low, if you know what I mean. Last but not least, probably the most telling of everything here, which gacha games am I going to keep playing and which ones am I going to drop? So Azur Lane and Nikke are staying. I'm already pretty invested with these, and they aren't time consuming. I also don't really feel bad if I don't log into them for a month. I can always leave them and come back. I will be dropping Punishing Grey Raven and SnowBreak Containment Zone. They're not fun to play on phones, and so they are competing with games like Elden Ring. On top of that, they have the weakest storytelling, so I'm not really invested in what is going on. These are games that I won't really play, but I will keep them installed, and I will just jump on them from time to time and see what's happening, maybe play for a month and then come back much later. Path to Nowhere, I will keep opening and just collecting daily rewards because it's very easy to do. I am invested in what is going on, but I am not in a rush to finish it. I think once I have a team and I am really invested, it might become more important to me, but this is one that I won't feel bad if I don't play it for a couple of weeks. Browndust 2 is one of my current babies. I am loving the story so far. This is a game that I want to open every day, and I want to see where Lathel and Justia go next in the story. I like to relax and play Browndust 2 for like 30 minutes before I get ready for bed, so it's a great way for me to unwind. Limbus Company. I would cancel my Netflix subscription if it weren't for that pesky stamina system. Limbus Company is currently my main game. I am enjoying exploring its systems. It doesn't feel overwhelmed with bloat. So yeah, I am addicted to this game, but not really to the gacha. I suspect that once I've played a lot of it, I'll end up taking a break, but every time I go back, I can see myself investing quite a bit of time in it because I just want to see more of it. So yeah, that concludes our gacha safari for realsy. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm gonna play Shadow of the Erd Tree now.